I'm Michael Strong. This is When School's Not Working, our weekly webinar on how and what to do if school is not working. I'm founder of ExpanseOnline.co, and I'm here with Kath Fraze and Matt Barnes, Matt of Education Game, Kath of 100 Roads. Is that your identity these days, Kath, 100 Roads?
Yes, yeah. Everyone knows me from Workspace, but yes, 100 Roads is our training and research and development organization. But yes, anything to do with co-learning, I'm your gal.
Right. Okay, anything to do with co-learning, she's your gal. And Matt, I'll let you give your version of you this week. So how do you want to describe yourself this week?
I do whatever Kath tells me to do, generally speaking. No, my work is with parents. I'm all about helping parents learn how to upskill themselves so that they can lead their kids and they can own their child's education. That's really all we do. We webinars and podcasts and one-on-one conversations and group training sessions, all that. So, yeah.
Terrific, terrific. So I just want to kind of dive in. I'm great to have you again this week because I have all sorts of things I want to drill down on with you. And so one of the things, so part of this is, certainly I'm extremely critical of schooling. But one, to put it more positively, because I love your have a positive vision, with all the kids that I care about, the first thing, let's leave college admissions aside and doing well in college aside, but without that, I want a kid to be confident, articulate, and presentable. And I would say if a kid is confident, articulate, and presentable, there are a huge range of great careers that they can do. And I would make the case that school rarely does much to help kids be confident, articulate, presentable. So what part of that would you agree or disagree with?
Think about how many times in your life algebra made a difference in your job prospects, right? And then think about how many times in your life being able to look someone in their eye, shake a hand, have a thoughtful conversation, be aware of what's going on in the world, be able to talk about a variety of different subjects, and then most importantly, probably being skilled in whatever the area of work that you're planning on doing. Those are the things that matter. And if you think about that, most schools, probably 98%, do very, very little on any of those areas. So yes, I 100% agree with everything you just said.
All right, I thought we'd build agreement there.
Right
Kath,
there.
before I push Matt a little bit farther down this road, you want to chime in? Agree,
Yeah,
disagree?
I know you're a huge Matt fan, so I know I'm gonna have to get in when I can. No, I agree with you. It's really, I think it's really important how people are showing up. How people are showing up in conversations, how they're actually just being with other people, engaged, caring, really making connections with people, and not just being in conversations because you want something from people. Children today are not in environments where they are really caring about each other. It seems to be all about what grade they're getting, or is this for credit, then I'll do it, and all these things. And it just seems that our whole value system of how things are operating is wrong. And I really want to get and create environments where we really care about each other, and we're engaged, and we're showing up to be and to do something together as a community. So for me, community feeling and developing trust and working with people that you really care about is really important. And I'm not seeing that in school environments. And in fact, I'm not seeing it very much anywhere.
So a lot to bounce off of in terms of that piece. And I want to go a little bit farther on the professional preparedness piece first, and then we can wrap that piece in. So thank you, Kath. That's huge. But just some specific careers. My wife and I both have businesses, we're both entrepreneurs. We spend a lot of money every year on creatives, graphic designers, web designers, video producers, packaging designers, photographers, video, you name it. And a lot of those, I never know what grades those, expensive creators had in school. And often when I talk to them, it turns out they're dyslexic, they didn't like school, it wasn't relevant. They learned their craft, whatever their craft is. But I would say I hire them because of who they are. You know, they understand what I'm talking about. You know, they give me a compelling vision. And I would make the case, just to stick with that one, that if you want to be a creative, and that there are lots of great digital media creative jobs today, that school provides very close to no value and often actually damages kids on their path to being a successful creative professional.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think, you know, I talk to parents all the time. In fact, I was speaking with a parent today who described how discouraged her daughter was by having to complete assignment after assignment that she had no interest in exploring. And, you know, like, what does that do to a child when over the course of months and years, in some case, I mean, really, we're talking a decade and a half, their only responsibility is to do something that someone else has told them to do. Right. I mean, that to me, right. I mean, there's so many points that you can really ask questions that are rarely asked in education, and it forces a parent, and in many cases, the child, to really question everything that's related to school.
So I want to play off this, and just something that came to mind, Kath. I'm gonna, you know, tease a little bit, but I find when I sell alternative education to parents, and you know, we're not supposed to be gendered, but very much I find if I can convince dad that this will help the child be successful, then I can talk to mom about the warm, nurturing, positive community. And again, it's not always that. It's not like dads totally don't care and moms don't care about the other side. But I would find that, you know, when I'm pitching and, you know, I'm selling, that's my pitch is, hey, dad, I can, you know, give your kid a successful career, and hey, mom, your kid's going to be safe and happy and, you know, well nurtured here. First, Matt, since you coach parents, am I just fair on the gender side, or how would you take that one?
You know, 90% of my interactions are with moms. Dads, you know, dads aren't either in the picture, or they are in some cases obstructioning the process, or obstruction to the process. But for the parents, for the moms, most moms are both wearing both hats you just described. They're focused on making sure their child is ready for the adult world, but they also know that they don't want a child who's just career ready. They want them to be character ready. And but again, most parents that I see, they recognize there's kind of, or they see life in these two stark contrasts. One is a school that they don't like, their child doesn't like, but the only other option that many parents imagine is homeschooling. And many say, I can't even consider that, but they don't realize all the different spaces in between. And I think now with COVID and pushing, you know, learning happening everywhere now, I think now there's a window of opportunity for moms and dads to start to realize there's all these shades of gray between those two extremes. And really the question is, how does a parent begin to explore them, begin to test them, and to find the one that works for their family and their situation?
Yeah, terrific.
Right, and I think,
go ahead.
sorry,
I was going to bring
Michael.
you in, Kath, but go ahead.
No, and I think this dovetails so beautifully with what you were talking about last week with, you know, you really need to create a vision for, you know, what you want for your child based on, you know, your values or what you know about your child, because ultimately as a mum, you know more about your child, you've watched your child grow, you know what is not working. You're in the best position, much better than a professional. You don't need an expert to create this amazing vision. And then you've got a filter, because there is so much out there. And, you know, you start, and then you start getting FOMO, start getting anxiety of like, but maybe this program is better than this program, right? Because you're signing up for a whole year and you've got no real clue, you know, what is better and what, you know, you don't have enough experience in the field to know which one to choose. But luckily, there are over 2 million people homeschooling, and now I don't even know how many are homeschooling during COVID, but there are so many people out there, and you know, thousands and thousands of Facebook groups of people in the same situation. And right now, all of these people are trialing everything that's happening out there. So, you know, if you have, you know, like a 13-year-old who's miserable, you could just easily join, you know, several Facebook groups, and you can find ones that are very much in line, you know, with what you want to do. Like if you're really into, you just want your kid not to do any schooling at all and heal from their school experience. You might be looking at more, school in the wild type of Facebook groups, and there are hundreds. I mean, there are so many different groups out there. Yeah. You sign up, you can say candidly, like, this is my situation, this is what my child needs. You're going to get like 73 replies, right? Of people right now doing exactly what you're asking for.
Yep.
And then you'll get a short list that then you can take that short list and go out to market, right? But you have a clue, right? Then you might narrow it down to 2 or 3 options. Then you can go back to the Facebook group and say, hey, I've done my research. I've got these 2 or 3 options. Who's done them? Which one would you suggest based on my child who needs this, this, and this, right? And then you'll get a really great starting point. And that is much better than what an educational psychologist could ever tell you, because these are mums with children very similar to yours.
Oh, yeah.
Who are in the field, who know all the available options, because that's what homeschoolers do. Typically, a homeschooling family is out there researching and finding the best thing possible for, for each of their children. And also they're out there, and many of them are fairly isolated, right? And we're all isolated, let's face it, in COVID. So they're very, very ready to give you what you need to know for your children. Now, if it's still overwhelming, even though you can do that, I mean, there are places like Michael's school, Expanse, expanseonline.co, and they put together a really great package of options, so you don't even have to do that research for a very, very reasonable amount of money. And then they have an advisory program, and I think having an advisory outside the family can also be a really strong addition to what you want to do with your schooling. So it doesn't have to be an expensive alternative. You can find very reasonable and most of all, you find really down to earth people who really care about their kids, who can really help you on your journey. So it's just a matter of just taking that step and being brave enough to doing what is right for your child.
Yeah. So I want to help people be brave. It sounds like a weird thing to say, but going back to confident, articulate, and presentable, I would make the case that, so I think one of my frustrations with the school system is I've known people in the school system who basically tell parents, if you don't do what we tell you to do, your child's life will be ruined. Yeah. Sometimes bluntly, sometimes not so bluntly. I would say confidence is something that any parent can tell. Is their child becoming more confident or less confident? And although, we don't want to, pull your kid out because they had one bad day, but I would say if over the period of weeks and especially months, if your child is not feeling more confident, for me as a parent, or as somebody who cares about children, alarm bells go off in my head. And the kid is not becoming more confident, it's like ambulance, call the ambulance, something's going on. You're nodding, Matt. What would you add to that, if anything?
Well, I mean, I to unpack it a little bit more for parents, why does confidence matter? Confidence, I mean, I guess there's some artificial kind of confidence, bravado, and that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about the confidence that comes from knowing that you can solve problems, you can learn what you need to learn, and you can exist with other adults equitably. Right. That to me is a type of confidence that, again, doesn't show up usually with kids coming out of school, capable of learning. Right. The confidence that comes from saying and knowing, gosh, when something comes along my way, or if I have a job opportunity, I need to learn some skill. Yep, I can do that. I know I can do it. I've done it. No problem. In school, it's the opposite, which is here's stuff that you don't want to learn, and we're going to force you to learn it. And the kids that say, you know what, I don't want to learn this, and the kids that dig their heels in, the kids that struggle with that, come away feeling like they can't learn. And that, to your point, Michael, is extremely dangerous, because a kid who feels like they can't learn, right? Let me just talk to about like black boys or boys of color. Kid who thinks that they don't have any ability to learn, they're on the streets, because that life doesn't require a ton of learning. You can get started right away. So yes, this is life or death stuff in many circumstances. Most families, most parents don't really talk about it in those terms. And Michael, you may recall that my background is actually healthcare administration. I ran medical practices at a children's hospital. And so for parents listening, the comparison I give is what happens when a parent walks into a hospital with a child who's really sick. That parent is an advocate. That parent watches who's touching their child. That parent asks questions. That parent says, I need to understand what you're doing and why. And if they don't like it, they're going to put their foot down and call it, and demand something else. And the healthcare system is actually ready for that. They expect that. That's normal behavior. But parents don't realize that when your kids are in a schooling context, it's just as dangerous, right? The kid who doesn't feel that they can learn things, that kid is in trouble, not just in the short term, in the long term. So parents, the courage comes from a recognition that my child is actually in harm's way. And I need, as a parent, as the adult in the room, I need to now step in and do the thing that the child needs me to do. That's a different framing of parent engagement. I don't even like that term, but
it's true, yeah. Matthew, and I see it played out over and over again. And we did a big study, and it said that 40% of people who want to pull their kid out have lost faith that the school is actually going to be able to fix the situation.
Yeah. Right.
And if they don't take their child out, it's just going to be more of the status quo. And what you're basically saying is that these problems that they've been having up to now are just going to keep accumulating on top of each other. They're not going to get better. Right? So even just removing your child from that situation, even if you did no homeschooling, if you did nothing, is going to be better. And I think, the schools work on deficits, right? They get there, they tout their value as fulfilling deficits in these children, right? The minute you get a child out of the school, you're working with your child's strengths and building on your child's strengths, right? And you're reversing that almost instantly.
Right. And you're building. Can I just give a quick story to another parent I talked to today?
Please do.
Please.
So, so we were, so she, one of the things that we're really about is about getting a vision of where you want your child to be and then building a plan about that. And so I was talking to a parent about her plan. And, one of the things her daughter said that she wanted to do, and she has a 8-year-old daughter, wanted to do this upcoming year was to have a sleepover. And so I said, well, depending on the whole deal with COVID, you have to decide on that. But your daughter needs to be a part of building, defining what she wants to do with the sleepover, laying out the plan for that sleepover, executing it, and then even evaluating it. Did my friends have a good time? What could we have done better next time? Those are skills that she's going to learn now because mom is going to help her daughter build the sleepover, essentially plan and execute the sleepover. In a school context, though, the teachers decide what the goal, legislators decide what the learning goals are. The teachers develop the plan. The child may execute some of it on a narrow range, and then someone else evaluates them. So kids never get a chance to learn any of these skills that are part of the confidence of being an adult.
So I want to go back to when I asked about confidence, you agreed, and then you pointed out the confidence to know that you can learn. And one thing, I'm always thinking of what most parents hear when they hear that, and they think, oh, my kid has the confidence to learn algebra or chemistry or US history. But what I hear you say now, which I think is way more important, is they have the confidence to learn how to plan a sleepover. And I think that's such a radically different mental model from what school is and what most parents believe is the value of schooling. I mean, we're indoctrinated in the notion that school is necessary to have a successful life. And right there, my perception is you've dramatically changed, if you were talking to a parent, their mental model of what it means for their child to be prepared to have a successful life.
Yeah.
It's not just a sleepover, like it's any idea, how could a child manifest anything that's inside here, and how can they get that thing that's inside here in a format that they can share? So that's what I call authentic creative self-expression. It's getting that idea out in some kind of design. Maybe it's in a recipe that you cook. I don't know how, every human's so different in how they express themselves, right? It's in a format so they can share it with others, and then maybe get others to help them on their plan. It's a form of communication. And then once they've manifested that, they're like, oh my God, I've done that. Yeah. What can I do next, right?
Right.
They build that confidence, and in ever increasing levels until the the point where they leave, let's say they leave a place like Workspace, or they've done this so much that they build this incredible confidence that they can actually shape the world they live in. So if we're creating these agents of change in the world, this is the kind of space we need to give children, right? So they can have practice in manifesting this and all the skills that come along with that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Michael, did you have something to say, or?
Yeah, I guess, I'm being connected to a lot of startups. There's the expression, get shit done. So in a certain sense, I'm saying like the fundamental thing we want kids to learn how to do is to get shit done. Yeah. And, I would say that at some point, if you want to do it in a professional setting, you need to learn how to write emails without spelling errors. But the way I'm seeing this is what we want to do is we want to get kids empowered to do things and feel confident about doing things. And then as they look at, is it a sleepover, or am I, trying to build a website for somebody, then they might need to develop, say, better reading and writing skills. But what I'm coming up with is that first, confidence about learning how to get stuff done. And then as your child, so I'm picturing a parent maybe pulling their kid out of school at age 10, 11, 12, whatever, before they're really damaged. And then let's make sure they're confident about getting things done. And then, let's explore all the accessory skills you might want or need to get bigger and more important stuff done. As kind of a general vision, because that's something we could probably tell most parents, that you should, I love your ambulance, your hospital emergency room thing, Matt. Okay, if my child's not confident, this is an emergency room situation. B, let's pull them out and help them be confident. C, confident getting stuff done, and then expand that. Is that kind of a simple general message?
I think it is. I mean, there's a couple, there's some nuance here, right? Every family is different. Every kid is different. The child I was talking about was 8 years old, right? So a sleepover organizing a sleepover is actually a fairly heavy lift for an 8-year-old. Now, the other thing though, this idea of, parents really understanding how damaged their child is, and then making the hard choice to pull out, that's a hard choice. But way before that are parents who can start to test and experiment with other forms of learning. That's what's happening right now with COVID, right? Parents are now trying new programs. Another parent I talked to today is trying an online math program. Her daughter was really interested in learning more about math. It's a problem-solving math program. She's loving it. That is a way for the parent to start to realize, oh, wow, there's all these assets outside of the building we call school. Now they're starting to get their hands on it. Over time, as parents get more confident in realizing that they can actually shepherd their child to a beautiful future, those parents actually will leap at the opportunity to pull out. Usually it's going to happen over the summer, right? So leading up to the summer, they're doing more and more experiments. Over the summer, they actually craft a learning plan that really accelerates their child in ways that schools can't. And then when September comes around, they have this choice. Do I put them back in something that I know they're not going to like and they're not learning the skills I want? Or do I keep them in this other model? And that's usually when people decide. Usually it's like, late August that parents are like, you know what, we're going to go ahead and we're going to jettison the tradition.
I want to talk about bringing the child to the decision-making process. I'm in favor of, certainly by 8, certainly 9, 10, having conversations with child about owning their own learning and being responsible for their own learning, and making it clear that doesn't mean about school learning, but I would have a conversation with a child. Look, I believe you can do much better outside the system. These are the supports we can provide. These are the resources I know about. Let's talk through this. And it doesn't mean that the child necessarily has to leave school, and they could decide, no, I'm really afraid of being home alone with mom and dad all the time. Please let me go to school. Okay, well, if you put work into it, or yeah, I'm really unhappy there. Please take me out. So what are your thoughts, each of you, on conversations with children about which direction, when and how, and what kind of conversations? When do we involve the child in this?
Well, yeah, I think you start early. I remember having these conversations very, very early with my child. I mean, she went to Montessori at 2.9, I think. So we were talking about it very early, and I was giving her explanations. But for me, it's not. I'm not actually anti-school. If the child is really happy and they really enjoy it. And they would prefer to do that. Maybe all their friends are there. But I want to make sure that it's my child's decision. It's not my decision trying to keep them there because it's more convenient for me. And, you know, I'm not opposed also. I mean, like if my child wanted to come out for a year, I mean, I homeschooled, so obviously I'm pretty liberal in my views about where my children school. But I've seen a lot of family experiences where they take their child out for, you know, and they just do it. Okay, we're just going to try this for a year and see, and then they might stick to homeschooling. There might be some children that want to go back. So I just think there is such a variety of children out there, and their needs are very, very different. And I think it's about really listening to your child, and it's them developing that sense of control over their learning. So whether they are taking control of their learning in a school situation because that's their choice, or they're taking control of their learning, you know, in a homeschooling environment because that's their choice. I think that's the important, you know, defining piece in my mind, because you can have someone at home homeschooling and they don't want to take any ownership of it as well. And you don't want that either. You want them to be fully in control of their learning and have this locus of control over their life, which is really going to build their accountability and responsibility and help them make the most of their freedom and all these things. So that would be my distinguisher. And I don't think all schools, you know, are bad. I think there's some really great schools out there, great programs out there. I just don't think there's enough of them. And I definitely think that, you know, there's definitely, you know, especially in the underserved community, there's atrocious schools. So I want people to be aware that there are a lot of people out there trying to create alternatives so you don't have to be suffering in a place where you know your child is not doing well.
Right.
And that you have people that you can reach out to, and you can get direction and help and options that you probably just don't know that are out there for you, but we're available.
That's right. That's right.
So when do you involve the child, Matt?
Yeah. So I have a graphic. I was going to draw it for you, but I don't have my whiteboard is over there. So I have a graphic called the leadership learning curve. Or learning of leadership curve. So imagine when the child is born, the child has zero ownership over their learning. Parent has 100% ownership over that child's learning. But then you fast forward to 14, 15, 17, definitely by 18, 90% of the learning is really in the hands of the child. So over that 17-year period or so, there's a switching of ownership. And it's not linear, but at some point, that child should have more decision-making authority about their life and their own learning than the parent. Where that happens is really based on how intentional the parent is at building that child's ownership. So how do you involve the child? You start, as Kath said, you start super early in building the tools that the child will need to be a decision maker for their own life. And by the way, by doing that, you are creating the conditions where your child can leave your home and you don't have to sweat them anymore. Because you've watched them, you've coached them. For me, my goal was by the time the child was 13, that was my goal, that they would have 80% ownership of their educational experience. It turned out to be more like 15. But right now I've got an 18-year-old, literally, I have zero idea. I mean, we talk about it, but I have no ownership or responsibility of his learning. My 16-year-old, we have daily check-ins because she's doing her own learning plan. And my 15-year-old the same. But I have no concerns about them making decisions for themselves because I've taught them. So yes, a child has to be involved in the decision making, and the more that child is towards that older end of the spectrum, if you now are making decisions for that child, you actually might be doing the same things that schools do, which is to disempower a child at the very moment in time that they need to be empowered to own their own lives.
Just for shock value, I always like to remind people of the Abernathy brothers. Do you know about the Abernathy brothers?
I don't.
Matt? So this is a great story. Back in 1910, two brothers aged 10 and 6 rode on horseback from Oklahoma to New York alone. And So in terms of how infantilized, even 20-somethings are,
Yeah.
and it turns out their dad was a cowboy, and, cowboys actually were mostly boys. In the movies, they're all these big, rugged, men, but a lot of cowboys. So dad was a cowboy at age 12, was riding, herds of cattle from Texas up to Montana as 12. So his little son got to be 10, and it's like time to take your brother across the country. So just in terms of how much ownership kids can have, way up.
Right.
And again, this is actually embedded in our culture for tens of thousands of years until the last 150, maybe at most. The bar mitzvah is the child. Now you're responsible for your walk, right? That was age 13. There are, 100 years ago or 150 years ago, 16-year-old young boys, we would call them boys now, they were young men, had a homestead, right? Had a family, and were handling their business. We have these expectations that shouldn't happen until 25 now. And I don't know where that has come from, other than just kind of a radical rethinking of what a child is capable of. There's a great book called The Vanishing American Adult that talks about this very issue. And there's many other books that talk about, excellent sheep, kids that get to college and they really can't think for themselves because they've been taught just to do what you're told for, 17 years or 15 years or whatever.
It is such high stakes, Matt. Like, I don't blame these parents.
It's high stakes in what regard?
Well, we know, right, that the opportunity cost of doing that is really, really high, right? But in society, there is so much pressure to get your child into the right college, and they're very competitive, and it's tough for the parents. It's tough for the children. The children are competing with each other, and they've been pitted against each other, for year after year after year, right, in these schools, in these different grades, to try and be valedictorian, to try and get into these classes. And there's intense pressure in the schools as well.
So can I talk? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's very, very hard to step off that bandwagon. Even someone who's been off the grid for a long time, right? Like me, right? There are times, I drive past the public high school and I look at the auditoriums and I look at the sports ground and I look at all these things. To pull your child out, you're kind of turning your back on these resources, and there aren't anywhere. Like, you can't go and have your kid in another sports team, right? You're basically pulling a child out of the town's society's space for children, and it's very, very hard for parents to do that. But it's also hard for them to have to constantly explain to other people why, right? And even damaging it.
Yeah, no,
it's just a hard decision. So I feel for everybody in this situation.
I hear you. I guess I want to help parents understand a couple things that are wildly misunderstood. And one is about what universities are actually looking for. I've sat on 2 university boards. One was a selected public university in Missouri. And the only students that got talked about at the board level were the wild standouts, the kids that were so unusual that the admissions office were saying, we got to do whatever we can to get this kid, right? And you know who those kids were? Those were the kids that didn't follow the path, that didn't do what every other kid did, that did not fight and claw for the 4.5 grade point average on a 4-point scale. There were the kids who found something that they were genuinely interested in, and their parents fed it. And they fed it to the point that child was now an expert in an area that they had a passion for. And here's the other thing. When they would apply to university, they wouldn't just send out 20 applications. They would apply to 2 universities and say, I want to study with that professor. That's why I'm applying to this university. Or I'm applying to that university because I want to study with that professor. Those are the only 2 I'm applying for. I know what I want to do, and I'm going to step on that campus and light it up. Those are the types of students that do not come through a typical educational platform. It just doesn't happen. And that is a travesty, because inside of every child is that same opportunity, but it gets stifled. So
And I want to
But
point
the
out,
kids
Nina,
aren't told that.
I'm preaching, aren't I?
well,
No, the
so I
kids
wanna
aren't
point
told
out,
that, so I feel bad.
Nina is a professional college counselor, high school to college counselor in New York City, and she's chiming in. Nina, do you want to speak up on your perception of what Matt's talking about vis-a-vis college admissions?
Oh my goodness, Matt, it is so true. And every year it's more true. The hardest clients that way are just what you say. It's the parents, right? What
Yes.
Kath is saying and what you're saying, and everything is we, and
Yes.
projecting the parent's career path on the child and so on.
Yes. Yes.
That never works. Never, ever, ever. I have parents who break into their child's Common App accounts, break into their essay documents, alter the words overnight. It happens every year. I can usually predict who they are. I catch them all the time, catch them and change all the words back. But, to tell a kid, the parent, don't put parents' hands in the essays, authentic voice. So that's part of it. But exactly what you're saying, those who target few schools, colleges, universities, even high schools, right?
Yep.
Few schools that match what they love to do. They got to do what they love, and then they need to do extra things to push it through if their targets are specialized in elite.
Sure.
Videos, communication pieces, all that stuff. And sometimes it takes so much selling on the part of the advocate, the counselor, the consultant. And when they buy in and they do it, Matt, it's just what you say. Then they fly with the admissions people.
That's right. That's right.
There we
Great
go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Kath, just going back to your concern that the students aren't told this and the parents don't believe this, I realize that you're much closer to an Andrew Sachs sort of, upscale community that believes in the system. I've lived most of my life in Austin and San Francisco among, tech entrepreneurs, cultural creatives. Most of the people I know don't believe in the system, parents and children alike. So in some ways, when I hear both of you talking, I'm thinking we need to create cultural networks for the parents and introduce them to other parents who know, look, school really doesn't matter. You don't need school to get into a good college. You don't need a good college to have a great career, because there are large and sophisticated networks of people. Elon Musk is creating an alternative school for his kid because he knows school's a joke. So what people don't realize in these sort of status anxiety, I'm not part of the system, is that there's a huge universe. So Matt, I gave you, a list of 15, 20 names of kids that had alternative paths. I came up another 5, 10, 15. I could just, pump in families that for decades have gone. Actually, my son dropped out of a expensive private school, and I was proud of him because he realized, nothing else there for him. I thought, good for you. You don't buy into
You dropped out of Harvard.
Exactly. That's bogus. Let's just get on with life, do real stuff.
But,
So yeah, I think part of this is giving parents the confidence. So earlier we were talking about the child's confidence and how important that is. But now I see we also really need to maybe create systems for giving parents more confidence. So how do we give parents the confidence to know, again, when they go into I love the emergency room. They go into the emergency room, their child is losing blood and passing out. And, I've seen moms in emergency rooms. They don't put up with, slowpoke stuff. They're advocates. So how do we transfer that sort of sense of urgency and confidence in the education world?
So that's the question that I have been wrestling with for 10 years. I think now with COVID, the game has changed. So here's my theory, because it's worked for me and it's worked for others. We have to find those kids. And that's why I asked you for those names. And my kids are 3 examples, by the way, and I'd be happy to talk about their specific journees. But we have to find those kids, show them the path, and then show what they're like. Because honestly, the reason I'm in this space is in part because parents started coming up to me years ago and saying, hey, what are you doing? Your kids are weird in a good way. They're weird. They
so
talk
that's
to me.
Weird to me.
Yeah. They actually talk to me. They talk to adults.
Yeah.
They speak like adults. They're well read. They're curious about things. What's going on? And I told them, well, we're not in a traditional school. And so they have the opportunity to do these things. So I think we have to elevate the stories of families
Yeah.
over and over and over and over until it's not
Yeah.
running away from the schools. You're actually running towards this beautiful opportunity that honestly, I wish I had. I was the compliant kid that said, all right, I'll just do whatever it takes to get a B, just to leave me alone. Right. So that is what is out there and what's possible now. It wasn't possible, or was much harder 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We need to elevate those stories now.
Yeah. Well, I think also we should talk about that. So many kids go to college these days without really knowing what they want to do. They haven't had any chance to explore.
Yes.
They go through a couple of years. It's a very expensive mistake. Then they have to do a
$50,000.
U-turn.
Yep,
U-turn.
yep.
Either start again or go to a different school completely. So there is no room in our system right now for any exploration.
Right.
For the real self-discovery that we would love these kids to have when they're younger, so that by the time they are actually in college, they really have a direction and they can make the most of this time, because after this time they're going to be probably pretty busy in a work situation. So it's everything is so high stakes right now. Right?
Yeah.
So we're pulling the rug out from under these kids. So I do say that I'm not opposed to school if it's the right school and the child's really invested and they really want to do that, because I think you have time to do both if you have a child who's fully motivated and wants to do that, right? But for the majority of people, they need much more time to explore different careers and have different experiences, and they learn by doing different things and getting exposed to different experiences.
Yeah, that's no.
So I'm thinking, Matt, you already have a plan to kind of, podcast interviews. I'm thinking maybe we need like 1 minute clips. I mean, what's the media? I'm ready to, let's go all in on a media portal where it's like 1 or 2 minute clips of dozens and then hundreds of people who have had great lives without regular schooling or deviating from the regular pathway. And then maybe, I don't know, this is where I have huge respect for systems gurus who can make this, searchable. There's so much out there that we're drowning in content. So how do we make this content available and compelling?
That's a great point. I mean, I think, the challenge is that every family situation is different. And so to your point, there is a system out there that could be built that talks about single mom, earning this amount of money. Here's the package and the structure that she put together. And talking to parents, I know like how to make that work. Here's a, 2-parent household making $75,000. Here's how they put it together. Here's a single dad with, multiple children. We can lay that out. And I've talked to enough parents to kind of see the patterns around that. But I don't think that most parents are going to feel like they're ready to jump until they hear enough stories and they're like, okay, I got to at least explore this, right? It's not a fringe thing anymore. This is the new opportunity.
Well, and stories that fit their particular situations. I'm thinking when I talk to a new parent or student, within seconds of hearing about a kid, and certainly within seconds of meeting a kid, I can create a game plan like instantly. But I realize most parents, they do need, it's different for a kid who loves math versus a kid that loves art, and different for a kid who's 8 from a different that's 15.
That's right.
And, and Kath, I know you're kind of big picture. I'm picturing some kind of a portal where we have this decision tree, and the single mother with a 10-year-old can go down this route and see 10, 15, 20 videos of, wow, amazing. And, the 14-year-old who loves music goes down this route and boom, 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 boom. I think we need a resource like that. And then once they see and they're convinced by all these stories, then, and this is the recipe. I think you're exactly right, Matt. Not that it's a recipe exactly, but this is how you do it for this kind of kid to knock it out of the ballpark.
Principles. Yeah, there are principles to follow.
Yeah, principles. Yeah. I mean, there's no right way either, right? So every child is different. And also there's no straight line in nature, right? Right. And especially so with humans, and they're going to have a zigzag in their development. And, you'd be amazed at, the effect of one really great person in your child's life that they come across, as a mentor or someone who's doing the thing that really resonates with them, and how much impact that person can have in their motivation and And even doing things like going to artisan fairs where the children are walking around and seeing people who are really in touch with their passions and are out there telling people about their passions, and they can walk around and just see what humans do and the breadth of what we do as humans, just to see and to plant all these different seeds that they can explore and think, ruminate on.
Yeah.
It's not right to have these children suffering so much.
If I may, Michael, there's one other
Please,
piece
go
to this,
ahead.
Kath, that you
Mhm.
reminded me of just now, which is, that vision of the child. We also have to layer that onto what we know about where and how society is moving, right? So
Mhm.
Google doesn't care if you have a college degree anymore. That wasn't
Right.
the case 5 years ago, right? So now the parent that's saying, I've got to have my child go to college, the right college, if I want him to work at a place like Google. No, Google's like, you know what? We want you to have the
train
right
them.
skills, right? We'll train them. You got to have the right base skills before you come in. And we'll even train you on that with it's a 6-month, I think it's $40 a month or something. It's very, very cheap. So the world is shifting in that direction. The world is shifting towards just in time problem solving. The deal with being a human is that we're excellent problem solvers, but that's a skill. So if your child is not learning that skill, so all these things are really kind of layering in what we know about learning, but also what we know about where society is heading, and readying our kids for that ultimate future. We don't know what it's going to look like exactly, but we know some of the principles that a child is going to need to have in order to be successful.
I totally agree. And one of the frustrations I have is I've been reading about this for at least 30 years.
Yeah.
And so this is like, it's not new. We know things are going in a different direction. And, I've given up on the system to change fast enough. But then even there in the private sector, the change is not happening very quickly either. And so I do think it's a matter of, as we've talked about, more alternatives, more vision. I think vision is part of it, concrete vision on how to escape the system and get better problem solving skills, better interpersonal skills, better verbal skills. And so I think it's a matter of, and in some cases it might not be possible. I certainly want to acknowledge that there are parents where, for whatever reason, maybe they're busy and exhausted, maybe they're ill, whatever, they have to accept the system. And then, whatever we can do to support parents who are stuck with the system. But I certainly think there are large numbers of parents who, with the right confidence, coaching, and support, could leave the system and give their children better lives. And I think we're all aligned in terms of creating an infrastructure, media, coaching, educational alternatives. So it's easy or much more available.
I think the potential upside is really, really huge. Like if you can really understand how your child is wired, what they care about, what they're good at, and find all these things that can be like little jetpacks on this journey, and these accumulate over time. You start early with this kind of thinking and your child takes its ownership, and you're constantly finding all the little things that can give them a boost, just like in snakes and ladders. You're just putting ladders there, removing the snakes, right? So at the end of the game, you're going to be sort of way ahead of peers. And, how that translates, it's a 17-year-old getting an amazing internship in the field that they're most passionate about with people in the top of their field because they've developed their skills enough to do that. They're getting experience, like job experience, so that they could even do college on the side, in a much slower format. I mean, they could be starting college at 14.
That's
you
right.
finished at the same time, but do it, a half time, but at the same time getting incredible experience with amazing internships. So it's really it's a mindset that parents need to shift, right?
Yep.
They need to reframe. Okay, the world is changing so quickly. We reframe. And if you really dig down into that, you start seeing these opportunities appear in front of you that you never thought were possible.
That's right.
And you've now just completely blown the roof off the possibilities for your child. And you're not keeping them in the mainstream possibilities, which are really, really limited, but people don't see they're actually limited.
That's right.
So it's really in the parent's mind, that structure and that stuckness. So we really want to try to illuminate what is actually possible.
And so Matt, the other thing, going back to the Black boys issue to some extent, Alt-Ed in many cities, certainly in Austin and San Francisco, is predominantly white, little bit of Asian, occasionally, African American or Hispanic. Is that just an accident, or what do you make of, I mean, how do we reach African American families more effectively?
Well, that's something that I'm becoming much more intentional about, Michael. So for most African American parents, this metaphor of cancer is actually pretty close. If you put your child in a toxic environment for long enough, you can expect, and the data points this out, right? You can expect certain things to happen with some predictability. And some of that is you can expect your child to not be really prepared for adult life, to struggle for the next 50 years of their life. I mean, these are very predictable circumstances. So for Black parents, it's more of a recognition of how sick this problem is. And then it's also inspiring them, hey, you can move this way, you can move forward. And I've seen families who have all sorts of barriers, like families you would never imagine could move away from the traditional educational structure. And they did it by working smart, super strategic. They bring in family members, they bring in other families who are just as concerned about what's happening in school, and they form pods, right? This has been going on for years, by the way. It's only now becoming a little bit more in the spotlight. My story was, I got pushed out of the school because the school was behaving in ways that were highly aggressive and highly damaging to my son, and I wasn't going to have that, right? So for African-American families, to some degree Hispanic families, they're the same kind of elevated concern, that if we can help parents understand that and understand that there is a process for them to move away from the school, or, and I haven't washed my hands of the school entirely, because at some point, if enough parents are behaving in these ways, the school's going to have no choice but to go, all right, let's change in dramatic ways to actually be the school that our kids actually need. That's not going to happen in any time horizon that's going to help kids that might be listening to the show, parents that might be listening to the show right now. But ultimately, that's my end game. But Black and Hispanic families, particularly Black parents with boys, this is serious business.
No, I completely agree. And as you know, it's, I think fewer than 60% of Black males graduate from high school. Oh, yeah. So, this is a crisis level sort of thing.
Right. It's unbelievably bad, right? It's inconceivable that as a nation, we haven't said, all right, we got to stop everything, figure out what the heck is going on and radically change things. But, I think you could point to some reasons why that hasn't happened. But regardless, for the parents that are in those circumstances, you have to understand your child may very well be on that pathway to nothingness. And we got to make sure we change that, because your child is, in my view, created by God to be a beautiful benefit to this society, to help heal this broken world. We got to make sure we raise them up in a way that allows them to be positioned to do that.
Beautifully said, beautifully said.
And after 12 years, you just assume that they would have enough, right? Like, it's majority of their life is spent in school.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, just one of the reasons why I think that change in the system is difficult. So I've gotten to a point where, I start out with public schools, I did a charter school, then private, accredited, and now I'm at the point where I don't even want accreditation, which sounds, everybody think, oh, accreditation is what gives you credibility. But, even that wonderful organization you introduced me to, Kath, they require grades. And, if a kid wants grades, totally fine. I'm happy to give you an A, B, C, or D based on whatever. But I also think that it's important for many children to be at a point where, for whatever reason, maybe they're not ready to get a grade in math this year, or maybe they're not ready to study math this year, or whatever it is. And so insofar as confident, articulate, and presentable is essential, what if grades reduce the probability that that's an outcome? Do you see, you wanted to talk about grades last time, we didn't get a chance to, Matt. So what's your short version on grades?
Listen, I want us to have an hour-long conversation about grades. I'm serious. It is important enough, and it is damaging enough where it's worthy of an hour conversation. So briefly put, And I've seen this in my own kids. I've seen it in other kids and families. Grades do two things that are terrible for a child. One, it teaches them that if they can get an A and not put much effort in, they should not put much effort in, right? That's the absolute wrong thing you want to teach your child. The second thing it teaches is if you work hard and don't get the A, then you probably wasted your time. You shouldn't bother next time. So it demotivates on one side. Actually, on both sides, it demotivates. So what we want are for kids to get excited and to learn, because learning is actually fun. We want kids to be lifelong learners, and grades destroy that. That's my 2-minute version or 1-minute version of the answer to your question.
Totally agree. One quick thought, and then I'll let you respond to that, Kath. The other thing is there are so many people, there's a whole kind of group of traditionalists, many of whom are on the right, but sometimes on the left, believe grades and test scores, rigor, we need more rigor, and all these namby-pamby people are going to destroy rigor. Whereas I see grades basically being exactly as you said, this false, in many cases, there are a few situations where it sort of works for some kids in some situations, but for many kids, it's totally bogus. And I would say they're pretending to learn, teachers pretend to teach, all to get the best grade they can, A's if they want to get to elite universities, B's if they want to do, honor roll, C's if they want to stay in sports, D's if they want to get their credit, but they don't want to learn, they want to get the best grade for the minimum amount of effort. Yeah. But I'll let you chime in on this, Kath.
Well, I just want to say that, like even in Montessori schools, I found that the kids really wanted tests because they wanted to, they wanted to, see how well they did, right? And so that's one thing. And some of them probably wanted to compare themselves to other people so they could, one up them or whatever. And, I'm not that opposed to them having, an accountability system like that. What I really find offensive is that we are doing all these tests to see if teachers are doing their jobs so that the school gets money. So that's what I find very offensive. And secondly, I don't like the idea that you can do a test that has proven to be inequitable, right? And that is this gating factor that universities use to spread out the top 20%, really, to see who they want at their elite colleges. And the grief it puts through people. I mean, the expense, obviously the elite are going to be able to afford expensive private tutors, but what happens to everybody else? It's really such an unfair system, and it breaks my heart that certain people are getting advantages over others. And
so we clearly need to have a whole session on grades and a whole other session on tests, because as you may or may not know, Kath, I actually think the SAT is one of our better tests of all the tests out there. So that's a much longer topic, and much, and I think it's possible to do brilliantly on the SATs without any money at all. So that's a totally different thing. But maybe our permanent co-host or maybe a guest, Matt, do you want any closing remarks in our last 2 minutes?
Well, back to the grades, measure what matters. And the things that matter are not being measured. Character, empathy, persistence, passion, kindness, right? Those things aren't measured. What's measured is, do you know the dates of the Battle of the Bulge, right? So parents, be aware that the things that matter most are not being evaluated in any significant way in your schools.
Well, I want to applaud. Sort of weird to applaud on Zoom, but what the hell?
There's a button for that, I think, right?
There we go, something
button.
Like that. Yeah. There we go, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much, Kath. Thanks, Nina and Robert. And can't wait for more fun next week on When School's Not Working. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.